On December 20th, 1971, the revolutionary idea of 12 doctors led to the creation of Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, a radically unique and tremendously ambitious organization that has redefined humanitarianism. Disregarding political boundaries and national affiliation, MSF set out to explore the world and help the suffering and forgotten. Encountering disease, poverty, warfare, religious tension, and government backlash in missions across the globe, MSF has continued to play a vital role in the humanitarian sphere. Exchanging critical information, life-saving medicine, and heightened public awareness with struggling communities, Médecins Sans Frontières continues to both defy and define humanitarianism. Despite its global scope and high expectations in the modern era, the world-renowned organization had humble grassroots beginnings. Nigeria, 1967. After years of instability in the Nigerian government, the country descended into civil war when a small southeastern region of Nigeria, called Biafra, seceded from the nation entirely. Nigerian federal forces enclosed the secessionist region a year later, displacing people, blockading cities, and starving innocent citizens. When reports of the atrocities committed by the Nigerian military reached Western society, hundreds of doctors, including many young French nationals, began to enlist in the Red Cross and traveled to Nigeria. Although these doctors came to Nigeria with hope and ambition, the reality of the Nigerian war soon became apparent. Federal troops cut off valuable supplies to aid workers, while opposing armies raided and attacked French medical centers as well as local villages. A crisis that should have been fought between politicians and soldiers hurt the common people most of all. Disease, starvation, and violence were rampant. To make matters worse, of all the world powers, only France supported Biafra. As a result, the international political community turned a blind eye to the small, struggling state. In the views of young field doctor Bernard Kouchner, the government, the United Nations, and even the Red Cross itself were complacent in their effort to help the citizens of Biafra.
It was impossible, it was illegal to take care of a patient on the other side of a virtual line called a border.
Kouchner encountered the connection between humanitarian aid and politics, a connection he believed should have never existed. It was clear to him government-backed organizations could not provide effective care neutrally to both sides of a conflict. After the Red Cross's withdrawal from the Nigerian Civil War, Bernard Kouchner and 12 other doctors working for the Red Cross in Africa had a vision, an idea for a new type of humanitarian organization, to explore the most impoverished and devastated areas and support without bias or political motivation, to encounter the neediest and most neglected, and to exchange medical knowledge and human rights awareness with the world. These ideas ultimately led to the creation of Médecins Sans Frontières in 1971.
Well, the idea of humanitarian aid is that you're providing aid, medical care to people based on needs alone. And so you're not doing it for other reasons, for political gains. We're not making decisions about who you treat based on their religion, their political affiliation, their ethnicity. It's the act of providing assistance without other ulterior motives.
In 1972 and 1974, Médecins Sans Frontières embarked on its initial missions managing natural disasters in Central America. It was in remote locations like these that MSF began to be seen not just as doctors, but explorers and pioneers of humanitarianism as well. These first missions gave the organization a chance to prove its commitment to its humble and transparent philosophy, but MSF's first true test would occur a year later, this time in the heart of the Middle East. Lebanon, 1975. Fierce fighting erupted in the streets of the capital of Beirut, pitting Christians against Muslims and reducing the most prosperous city of the most prosperous nation in the Middle East to rubble. The Lebanese civil war had begun. Most organizations and governments did not bother to aid the civilians of Lebanon, too afraid to interject themselves in this tense political situation. However, it was here that MSF engaged in its first major mission, setting up a hospital in Beirut and providing aid on an impartial basis. For the first time, MSF encountered a situation where the security of the mission was dangerously unstable. For the first time, their doctors will be battle-tested. As guerrilla warfare raged on in the streets, MSF doctors continued providing medical attention to wounded fighters in makeshift hospitals mere city blocks away from the conflict. War between the Christians, Shias, and Sunnis raged for 15 years, ending in an uneasy stalemate in 1990. However, even with the end of the war, MSF's mission in Lebanon did not change. The bloody conflict amassed 250,000 casualties and decimated Lebanese infrastructure, and still to this day MSF operates throughout the country. What did change was how the world saw this new organization. Once criticized for their seemingly misguided and naive creed of impartial emergency medical care, MSF made a place for itself on the world stage for this very same reason. Médecins Sans Frontières went where no organization dared to go and saved the lives of Muslims and Christians indiscriminately, all while encountering intense pressure against its neutrality in the brutal war zone. Through the impartial exchange of vital medical equipment and expertise with Lebanon and the initiative to bring the human rights violations they witnessed to the forefront of global consciousness, Médecins Sans Frontières changed humanitarian aid forever. After successful missions helping refugees from the Cambodian, Rwandan, and Bosnian genocides, MSF received a Nobel Peace Prize for its dedication to humanitarian aid. The organization also began to better organize itself to expand its global reach. At the turn of the 21st century, the future looked bright for MSF. However, it was not long before once again disaster struck, and the organization would witness a crisis of unparalleled severity. Haiti, 2010. A magnitude 7 earthquake struck the island nation on a Tuesday afternoon, January 12th. In the wake of this disaster, over 160,000 people were injured, killed, or displaced within the country. Whatever infrastructure that had existed outside of the capital of Port-au-Prince was destroyed, and the government was vastly unprepared to handle the chaotic situation. MSF was among the first to encounter the widespread disaster. Despite their rapid response and experience with disaster relief, the conditions they encountered proved to require the largest, most coordinated humanitarian aid effort the organization had ever undertaken. At its peak, 350 international doctors with MSF were stationed in Haiti to help the crippled nation find its feet again. In doing so, they established 26 facilities, including hospitals, rehabilitation centers, and general health centers. 17 cargo flights full of doctors and supplies were dispatched within the first week alone.
I think in the last few years after the Haiti earthquake, we did a huge amount of work. The cholera outbreak that followed the Haiti earthquake about 10 months later, we treated over 120,000 patients, I think, in 3 months. It was 80% or close to 80% of the caseload in the country. I think those kinds of responses demonstrate our ability to scale up in the face of incredible adversity.
In the first 6 months, MSF provided desperately needed medical care to over 173,000 people, performing 11,000 operations. Haiti received a vital infusion of aid from MSF. From rainwater collection basins to inflatable hospitals to brave doctors from across the globe, the help the organization provided was invaluable.
And for me, a lot of the most memorable moments are seeing, one, the work of our teams in the field, but two, also like the strength of the people we serve. Oftentimes, there's a sense that people have that if you're in a crisis, you're a victim. And I think most of the people I've met in my life, be it in South Sudan, in Lebanon, in the West Bank, Haiti, they're really tough, strong, resilient people who are just their circumstances happen to be so dire, but they're really many times the lengths that they will go to save their own children and their family is really heroic. And I think sometimes that gets lost in the portrayal of crisis and refugees. They become faceless masses. And so I know myself and my colleagues remember those faces, remember those stories. And we don't see victims. I think we see people who are very strong and resilient.
Through these vital exchanges, MSF showed the world once again how much could be achieved by a non-governmental organization. As months turned to years and conditions began to stabilize, many MSF hospitals and clinics were turned over to the Haitian government or other organizations. Today, Haiti is a country on the road to recovery, due largely in part to the work of MSF. In many ways, today's world is much different than that of 1971, when a group of 12 doctors came together to change the way lives were saved in the most remote parts of the world. However, MSF's commitment to humanitarian aid regardless of race, religion, or political affiliation still rings true after 44 years. After over 4 decades of crises and conflicts, the group of doctors, now 30,000 strong, remains the voice for places and peoples unknown to the outside world, and the first presence on the scene when the worst-case scenario becomes grim reality. MSF has explored all corners of the globe, many places untouched by Western civilization for decades. These doctors have encountered unimaginable disease, starvation, and violence, and have invariably made an impact on their alleviation. Exchanging vital medicine and medical expertise for increased public awareness of human rights violations wherever they occur, the organization has sought to impact both the disaster zones in which they serve and the larger unbelieving world beyond. As politics, war, religion, and ethnicity continue to build barriers within humanity, it is the goal of MSF to remind society that there are no good or bad victims, no right or wrong dying. The future is uncertain, but one step at a time, operation by operation, MSF is working to break down the borders that divide us all.